World of Warcraft Beyond the Dark Portal by Aaron Rosenberg and Christy Golden. Chapter 7. Muradin Bronzebeard, brother to King Magni and ambassador to the human realm of Lordaeron, hurried through the corridors of the royal palace. Hey, all these twists and turns and nooks and crannies, the dwarf muttered to himself. If he remembered correctly, the spiral staircase that would take him to the king's private apartment and balconies was around here somewhere. He seemed to recall that if he ducked through this armory hall, he'd... Oi! Muradin jumped slightly, even as he realized the voice belonged to a child. His grin was hidden by his thick, bushy beard as he peered around the corner to see young Arthas standing in front of a suit of armor on a small pedestal. The prince was all of 12 now, a right blondie young lad, all smiles and golden curls and rosy cheeks at the moment, though Prince Arthas looked very serious and had a wooden sword pointed at the throat of his suit of armor. "Think you could pass here, vile orc?" Arthas cried. "You're in Alliance lands. I will show you mercy this once. Begone and never return." Although Muradin was hungry and although he was late, he found himself watching, smiling. This was what they fought for, was it not? He and Magni and their brother Bran and the humans, Lothar, rest his soul, and young Tyralion. They'd fought together against the Orcs to save Ironforge towards the end of the Second War, and then Muradin and Bran had gone with the humans to the Dark Portal to watch its destruction with satisfaction. Keeping the wee ones safe, buying a future for them all. Arthur Sifton. "What? You will not depart? I've given you a chance, but now we fight." With a fierce cry, the young prince charged. He was wise enough to actually attack the ancient suit of armor, which would not, no doubt, incur his father's disapproval, but set to his imaginary foe with vigor in a few paces away. Muradin's grin faded. What was this? Who in the world had been teaching this boy? Looking how wide and uncontrolled that pretended parry was, and the grip... Wrong. All wrong. He frowned terribly as, after a particular energetic swing, Arthas lost his grip on the wooden sword, and it flew across the room to clatter loudly on the floor. Arthas gasped and looked around to see if the sound had drawn attention. His cheeks turned bright pink when he met Muradin's gaze. Ambassador, I was just... Muradin coughed, as embarrassed for the boy as Arthas himself was. "I'm looking for your father, boy. Can you direct me? This Inferno's palace has too many turns." Arthas pointed to a stairway on his left. Muradin nodded and hurried up the twisting steps, anxious to be away from the scene. He arrived just in time to hear Thoris Trollbane bellowing, which, he mused, was hardly anything new. "Trade? You? With you? You're double-damned no-good Horde sympathizers." What was going on? Muradin burst into the balcony, expecting to see... Well, he wasn't sure what, but it certainly wasn't a small green being with large bat-like ears and eyes that were currently wide with appreciation. Yeah. He was completely bald and wore trousers, a crisp shirt and a waistcoat, and a monocle that had popped out and was now swinging wildly from a chain attached to his person. "No, no, no," the green creature gasped in a strange, shrieking voice, waving his hands frantically. He stood about eye level with the breakfast table, at which Trollbane and King Tyrannus were seated, and fumbled with the monocle. "You got me all wrong. It's not like that at all." "Isn't it, Krisk?" The mildness with Tyrannus uttered the word told Muradin that nothing of the real threat was going on. The king reached for a piece of bread and began to butter it. "No," Krisk explained, looking offended. "Well, one trade prince, yes, did that." He coughed slightly. "Allied with the Horde, but only one foolish prince, and even he came to his senses after the Second War. But the rest of the goblins have come to realize that it's much better to remain neutral. Much better. For you, for us, for everyone. Free trade thrives that way, and we all benefit." Muradin scowled. He knew what manner of creature he was facing now, a goblin. "What's this wee green money grabber doing at our breakfast table, Tyrannus?" Muradin asked, shuddering past the creature. Before the king could answer, the goblin burst out. Crix Wicklack. Pleasure to meet you. I see you're a dwarf. Brilliant observation, Trollbane growled. Perhaps your people would like to enter a trade agreement. These two humans don't seem keen on it. I mean, think about it. Crix smiled engagedly, the effect marred only by the sharpness of his teeth. You like to mine? Why, we like to tear down trees. It's a perfect business relationship. Our shredders can clear land. Thank you, Crix. That will be enough. Tyrannus interrupted. Now that Ambassador Murden has arrived, we have business to attend to. I'll talk again with you later this afternoon and look at the papers you promised me. What? Murden scowled at Tyrannus. This wee bugger does deals with both sides, Tyrannus. I'd soon trust a... Hey! Crix froze, the apricot scone he had snagged halfway into his mouth. He smiled weakly. Murden glared. Within a month of his arrival, the dwarf had been on first-name basis with every one of the palace's chefs, and he had gone to extra efforts to secure the friendship of the pastry chefs. Such overtures were now bearing sweet, delicious fruit, if the scones were any indication, and now this goblin was about to devour his pastries? King Tyrannus asked you to leave, he said. Crix nodded, and the monocle fell out again. He popped the scone into his mouth, bowed low, and scurried off. Ruddy parasite that one is, growled Muradin. But amusing, Tyrannus said, and his ideas do have merit. Now that you are here, Ambassador, I fear we must talk of less amusing things, such as the situation with King Perinold. King? Bah! The word sits ill in my mouth. It's an outrage. King. Bah! The word sits ill in my mouth. It's an outrage, Trollbane cried. He slammed a fist down on the table, making cups and flagons and plates jump. He betrayed us all, damn near destroyed us, and this is all he gets. His long face set in a deep scowl. I say prison, if not outright execution. Hey, I'd not be keeping traitors in gilded cages, myself, said Muradin. He did not mince words. He said what was on his mind outright, and didn't worry about whom it might offend. Muradin knew that some of the Alliance rulers found that combination distressing, but he also knew that both Tyrannus and his old friend Trollbane found it refreshing. The three sat at a small table on one of the palace's higher balconies that overlooked the lake just beyond the city, with the mountain forming a backdrop beyond. It was a stunning view, but also served to ground their discussion, for it was through those same mountains that Orcram Doomhammer had led his horde, thanks to the treachery of Alterax's ruler, Aedan Perinold. After the war, Tyrannus had led the Alliance troops to Alterac, declaring martial law and taking Perinold. The fellow Trollbane had been ranting into custody, but Tyrannus was simply placed the former king under house arrest, confining him to his palace and the rest of his family to close watch. Nothing more had been done with them since then. Trollbane, for one, was not satisfied. As Perinold's closest neighbor, he had long been forced to weather the Alterax king's wily schemes, and it had only been Trollbane's quick thinking and equally quick action that had sealed the mountain pass and cut off the portion of the Orcish horde. Otherwise, the entire force would have flowed down into the plains and across the lake towards capital city itself, and most likely the city would have fallen. I agree. He deserves far worse fate, Tyrannus said carefully, clearly trying to soothe his friend's temper. Muradin reached for a scone and a hard-boiled egg. But he is, or at least was, a sovereign king, Tyrannus continued. We cannot simply exile him or imprison him, not without making every other king worry that we will do the same to them if they disagree with us on anything. We will if they turn traitor like he did, Trollbane argued, but he soon settled down. He was far from stupid, Muradin knew. That gruff exterior hid a sharp mind. Aye, it's a tricky issue, Muradin said, deciding to help himself to another pastry. "You can't be dropping him off a cliff or you'll lose your trust of your other followers. You can't be leaving him to get away with it either." "We need to force him to abdicate, Tyrannus pointed out yet again. This is not the first time they had this discussion. Once he is no longer king, we can try him and execute him just as another alliance noble. He tugged at his beard. "The problem is, he is refusing." Trollbane snorted. "Of course he is. He knows that means his death. But we have to do something, and soon. Right now, he's got too much freedom, and that's bound to cause trouble." Tyrannus nodded. "It is certainly sat for too long," he agreed. "Something must be done about Alterac, especially with those new problems brewing." He sighed. "The last thing we need is to fight another war whilst worrying about betrayal again." "And what of the lad?" Murden asked, flicking a stray crumb from his majestic bronze beard. Will he no be trying for the throne?" "Adolin, you mean?" Trollbane replied. He snorted. "Cut from the same cloth as his father." "I don't care for young Adolin much myself," Tyrannus admitted. "He was far too pampered as a youth. He has never known hardship or trivial. He has never faced danger. I fear he has no leadership skills, either. Yet, what grounds have we to deny him the throne? He is Aiden's heir, Alterac's crown prince. If his father does abdicate, the crown falls to him." "There is no proof he knew of his father's treachery," Trollbane said grudgingly. "Not that being ignorant is much better than being underhanded, but at least he has that in his favor." Just then a servant appeared at the door. Murden frowned, fearing that the pesky goblin wanted to talk to them. Instead, the servant had good news. "Lord Devo Pastor wishes your audience, your majesty," he told Tyrannus. "Ah, send him up. By all means, Lavin," Tyrannus said. He turned to Trollbane and Murden. "Have you both met Lord Pastor?" Prestor. "Aye, and he's a fine man, he is," Murden replied. "And much to his credit, he's survived all well as he has with all he's faced." Trollbane nodded his agreement. Lord Prestor had been dealt a harsh hand by fate. Murden reflected as he bit into an egg. He'd never heard of the man until recently, of course. He didn't much follow all the twists and turns of human nobility, but from what he had been told, Prestor had been the ruler of a tiny domain deep in the mountains of Lordaeron. He could trace his ancestry back to the royal house of Alterac, and was a distant cousin of Perinold's. Prestor's entire realm had fallen to a dragon attack during the Second War, and he and a handful of close family alone had escaped. The first anyone heard of the man or his realm had been in shocking introduction. Prestor had staggered all the way to the capital city without servants or guards, indeed with little more than the clothes on his back and his good name. His lineage had earned him admittance into the noble circles, and his engaging personality had won him friends. The three at the table among them, it had been Pastor's suggestion to pass martial law in Alterac, and not only Tyrannus, but the rest of the alliance had agreed at once. It was a fine, albeit temporary, solution. The man in question stepped onto the balcony, a moment later, and executed a graceful and deep bow, his black curls gleaming almost blue in the warm early light. "Your Majesties," Pestor murmured, his rich baritone carrying easily across a small space. "And noble ambassador, how good to see you all again." "Indeed it is," said Tyrannus jovial. "Sit down and join us. Would you care for some tea?" The apricot scones are particularly fine today," Murden offered, covering his mouth with his hand as he inadvertently sprayed some crumbs. Something about Prestor's characteristic tidiness always made the dwarf feel a bit rustic. "Many thanks, my lords." Prestor seated himself gracefully, though not before using his napkin to quickly dust off his seat, and poured a cup of tea. Murden offered him the plate of scones, but Prestor smiled, holding up a manicured, uncalloused hand in polite refusal. "I hope I'm not intruding." Not at all, not at all, Tyrannus assured him. In fact, your timing is excellent. We are discussing the matter of Alterac. Ah, yes, of course. Pernold took an appreciative sip of his tea. No doubt you have heard about young Isian. He said. He seemed surprised at the blank looks he received. In response, one of Lord Perinold's nephews, little more than a youth still. Ah, yes, ran off to Gilneas, didn't he? Trollbane asked. Indeed he did, shortly before you declared martial law throughout Alterac. Rumors say he is hoping to rally support there for his own bid for the throne. Greymane mentioned something of that, Tyrannus growled, but he has not met with the boy or encouraged his suit in any way. Prestor shook his head. He is noble indeed. King Greymane, he mused softly, to overlook something to which could so easily work to his benefit. All we need to do is back Isian for the throne, and Gilneas would gain a direct stake in Alterac's welfare, and no doubt favor status through the kingdom's many mountain passes. Murden scratched his beard. Hey, that'd be a hard one to pass up, he agreed. Tyrannus and Trollbane exchanged glances. Greymane was canny enough not to miss such an opportunity, yet he claimed he'd not spoken with the boy. Had he lied, or was he playing a more subtle game? What do you think should be done with Alterac? Tyrannus asked Prestor. Why do you ask me, sire? An outsider's perspective is useful, and we value your opinion. Prestor colored slightly. Truly, you honor me. Thank you. Well, I think you should claim it for your own, your majesty. You are the leader of the Alliance, after all, and took the brunt of the cost for the last war. Surely you are due reward for all your efforts. Tyrannus chuckled. No, thank you, he said, holding up a hand in a mock horror. I have more than enough to handle here in Lordaeron. I have no desire to double my troubles by taking on a second kingdom. Murden knew he had considered the idea, of course, and from some vestiges he held merit, but the trouble it would cause, not least of them among his fellow rulers, would far outweigh the benefits, at least to Tyrannus' mind. How about you, then, your majesty? Prestor suggested turning to Stormgrad's king. Your quick action stopped Perinold's treachery. I well know you lost many men defending those mountain passes from the Orcs. A shadow of pain flickered across the young noble's face, and all three of his companions winced slightly, knowing exactly where his thoughts had led him. Maybe that was why he was so meticulous about his person. If he had been forced to flee the city that had been destroyed by dragonfire, walking for ages in the same filthy clothes, Murden mused, maybe he'd be a bit of a dandy now too. Trollbane frowned thoughtfully, but before he could speak, Tyrannus interjected gently. Neither Trollbane nor I could claim Alterac. It is not simply a matter of one kingdom invading another. We are all parts of the Alliance, and must all work together to protect our world and our lands. The Alterac as a whole defeated the Horde and won. The Alliance as a whole defeated the Horde and won the war. That means any spoils of war, including Alterac, must fall to the Alliance as well. He shook his head. If any one of us tried to annex Alterac, the other Alliance rulers would feel slighted, and rightly so. Aye, Murden agreed. It must be decided by all, or not at all. He grinned. Though, presenting a fine idea to the rest could ease the matter somewhat. Prestor nodded and set down his cup. My apologies, if I spoke out of turn, he said, or if I offended you in any way. He offered them a smile. I can see I still have much to learn before I can hope to match your wisdom or diplomacy. Tyrannus waved the apology aside. No harm done, dear boy. I asked for your opinion, and you gave it. Part of the reason we three were meeting here was to discuss the very matter in hopes of finding some way to satisfy everyone involved and still keep Alterac safe and active. He smiled. Our friend Muradin is right. If we can present a good plan to the rest of the Alliance, it could save much time and argument. Of course. I only hope my small contribution has been in some way helpful. Prestor stood and bowed deeply. Now, if you will excuse me, I will leave you to these weighing deliberations, which I fear are far beyond my own ability. He waited for Ternus' nod of permission, then graced them all with a smile and exited the balcony. Trollbane watched the young lord go, frowning. Prestor is naive, he said, but he has a point. Maybe Alterac should pay reparations. With what? Murden scoffed. The bled dry just like all of us. Besides, that sounds too much like blood money, which is the same as, saying vengeance. Most of our money is going toward rebuilding, Ternus pointed out. We added Alterac's treasuries to the Alliance once we took control of the kingdom. Aye, and the Orc encampments are no cheap either, Murden added. With all the money gone to those and repairs, and that be finding a new fortress by the portal, what's left for reparations? Trollbane sighed. You're right. I feel they should pay somehow. Alterac's betrayal cost so many lives. Pernold's betrayal, Ternus corrected gently, but firmly. We must remember that. Very few of Alterac's citizens even knew of their king's treachery. Pernold simply ordered them away from certain passes and made those trails accessible to the Horde. It was less a question of Alterac's helping the Horde than of its king granting the Orcs free passage and keeping his own citizens out of the way. True enough, Trollbane agreed. I've known many from Alterac over the years, and most are fine folks, not like the snake of a king. He shook his head, drained his flagon, and wiped his beard and mustache with the back of his hand. I'll give the matter more thought, he promised. As will we all, Muradin assured him, snatching up one last scone as they rose from their seats. Don't worry, we'll find a solution yet. I'm sure we will, Ternus agreed. I just hope we can do so before we're forced to set the matter aside for more pressing issues. His two companions knew what he meant. They had received Kagar's warning only a few days before, and now were waiting on word from Tyrolian if the Horde did attack again. If the portal did reopen, all questions about Alterac quickly became moot. As long as Pernold was under house arrest and the kingdom under Alliance control, they could worry about other details later, if they survived. Muradin thought somberly of young Arthur swinging away at a suit of armor, and hoped that the prince would not get a taste of war just yet. Chapter 8. Clouds hung low over Stormwind, brushing the tips of the city's main towers. A chill wind tugged at the guards' cloaks as they huddled at their post outside Stormwind Keep, shivering inside their commander tent. Tyrolian and his advisors were still awake, poring over maps in one of the armories in the keep, now the Alliance command post. The guards had nodded to the beautiful elf who had accompanied their commander and was currently in the room with the other strategists, though anyone with eyes could see the tension between the two. They shivered, but paid no real heed to the particularly cold breeze that wafted through the city, danced in through the keep's gate doors, then drifted up the wide central hallway and veered to the left. Up it swirled through another corridor and across a small courtyard open to the cloudy night sky. Paraguards stood to either side of the entrance to the royal library. They shivered as they felt the breeze brush up against them and squinted as the shadows around them seemed to deepen. Suddenly, a stronger wind sprang up, whisking the shadows away and revealing several figures in their stead. Four of them seemed to be human, at least in size. They all wore heavy hooded cloaks and strange wrappings around limbs and torsos, but their eyes glowed a fiery red. The last figure, however, towered over them, and even in the near dark, his skin gleamed green. One of the guards inhaled to cry out in alarm as he drew his sword, but never got the chance. The orc stepped forward, already swinging a massive axe. The guard fell into two pieces. His companion was able to raise his shield and block a blow from one of the strange wrapped figures and thrust with a spear, to no avail. Another of the intruders caught the spear haft and chopped it in half, then spun and delivered a sweeping blow to the guard's neck just above the shield's edge. The man fell without a sound, his head nearly severed, and the figure stepped over the two twitching corpses, pushing the doors open and entering the royal library.
"Be quick,"
Gorfin instructed.
"We must not be discovered."
His Death Knights nodded, as did Pargath's throat splitter, the orc who had so quickly dispatched the first guard. Gorfin had warned the Bleeding Hollow warrior with him, had wanted the Bleeding Hollow warrior with him, since they knew his word better than any other Horde members, and Pargath had impressed him as one of the smarter and quieter warriors available. All five of them spread out, combing the library for the prize. After several minutes, Pargath cursed.
"It's not here,"
he whispered.
"What?"
Gorfin joined the warrior next to an empty glass case.
"Are you sure?"
In response, Pargath gestured at the case and at the small tan card snuck in one corner. Gorfin had access to his host body's memories and skills, and after a second of concentration, he could make out the writing. Book of Medivh, not to be opened without express permission from the king or from the Alliance commander.
"It was here,"
Gorfin mused, studying the case's deep violet interior, which had clearly been weighed down by something large, heavy, and rectangular.
"But where is it now?" "Over here,"
one of his Death Knights called softly, and Gorfin hurried toward him, Pargath and the other two Death Knights right behind him.
"It looks as though someone else was thinking along the same lines we were."
The Death Knight pointed at a small reading alcove and the body within. The corpse wore the armor of an Alliance guard, a dagger hilt protruding from the narrow space between the helm and breastplates.
"Alterac,"
Pargath whispered, staring down at the dead man.
"That insignia there."
Pargath pointed to the markings on the dagger hilt.
"That's the Alterac crest."
Gorfin's own host memories confirmed it.
"So, Alterac has the book,"
he mused. Despite his betrayal during the previous war, Lord Perinold still ruled Alterac, at least for now, and the book was valuable to the Alliance. Alterac could use it as a bargaining chip. Yes, it did make sense.
"But why leave behind such an obvious clue?"
he wondered out loud.
"That's a careless assassin." "Perhaps he is sending a message," Pargath suggested, "showing the Alliance that Alterac and its king are still in the game. Or,"
he grinned, his tusks showing,
"maybe he was just a careless assassin." "Well, we should not be so careless,"
Gorfin said.
"We need this book, and so we must go to Alterac. Take the dagger. I'd just assume the Alliance didn't have the same clue we did. The corpse is fresh. Let the guards think all three were slain by the same hand when they come across them on the morrow."
Pargath obediently knelt and tugged free the deadly weapon.
"To Alterac, then." "But not just yet. We need to keep our original plan as much as possible. We are still going to Black Rock Mountain. We need Ren and Mane and the red dragons they control."
Pargath nodded.
"Black Rock is on the way to Alterac,"
he pointed out.
"Exactly."
Gorfin grinned.
"And with a red dragon at our disposal, we could be there and back in hours and still return to the portal ahead of schedule."
He nodded.
"But first, we must leave here as quietly as we came."
He beckoned them to him. The shadows crept closer, the temperature in the library dropping a moment later. A chill wind slipped through the doors, past the cooling bodies and the pools of blood around them, back down the corridor and out of the keep, where it quickly escaped into the night. A day later, Gorfing and his band reached Black Rock Mountain. The small group had grown. He had contracted Gaz Soul Ripper as his fellow Death Knight, and sent Fenris Wolfbrother of the Thunderlord clan, Tagar Spinebreaker of the Bone Chewer clan, and several of each's finest warriors. The orcs had met up with Gorfing and others at the base of the mountain range as commanded. Their expanded group was as large a force as Gorfing felt they could assemble without being spotted by the Alliance. He hoped it was large enough to get the attention of the Sons of Blackhand. They climbed openly up the mountain, making sure the orc sentries hidden nearby could see them clearly. Gorfing did not want even the suggestion that they might be attacking or sneaking in. Finally, they reached the top, where the rocks had split open and magma flowed through natural channels like glowing red rivers beneath graceful bridges. A massive stone keep stood against the spire itself, carved from the same glossy black rock which gave this place its name, and Gorfing's lips curled in a wary memory. This had been where Doomhammer had established his base, and where the Horde Warchief had introduced Gorfind and the other Death Knights to the assembled clans, and it was below here in the valley at the mountain's feet where Doomhammer had fought the Alliance leader Lothar and won, only to be bested by Lothar's second, Tyralian. Defeat and victories both had their ghosts here. He did not waste much time recollecting. He had the present to think of and his own advancement. With a gesture, he instructed his group to halt at the entrance. Sure enough, a moment later, 4 armed guards, large and powerful, appeared, looking more than eager to strike.
"We come to speak with the Sons of Blackhand. Tell them Terran Gorfing has news and a proposal for them."
He stepped forward and let the hood fall from his face. The guards paled slightly. One of them whispered something to another. A second orc listened, bowed, and disappeared into the darkness. He returned a few moments later. The commander listened, then turned to Gorfing and his group.
"Stay close,"
he warned, and led them into the keep himself. Gorfing followed as they went deeper into the heart of the mountain, his glowing red eyes taking everything in. The keep was clearly in heavy use, and they saw several other orcs marching past here or there, and stopped to study them as they passed. Obviously surprised to see a Death Knight here on Blackrock Spire, but none of them dared say anything. Finally, they reached the wide chamber Gorfing remembered as Doomhammer's throne room and war council. The figure who now lounged in the heavy black chair, carved from the mountain rock, was shorter than Doomhammer, more brutish in appearance, with heavier features and an unkempt mane of brown hair. Metals and bones dangled from his hair, nose, ears, and brow, and his armor was heavily adorned, as was his massive razor-sharp sword.
"Ren,"
Gorfing said as he stopped just beyond the sword's reach.
"Gorfind?"
Ren Blackhand, co-chieftain of the Blackrock clan, replied. His ugly face spit in a grin that made him look even uglier. He shifted his position, flinging a leg over the arm of the throne.
"Well, well, well. What brings you here, dead man?"
Came a higher-pitched voice. Gorfing's eyes
Yeah!
Came a higher-pitched voice. Gorfing's eyes shifted to where Ren's brother Maine crouched beside and just a little behind the throne, half hidden in the shadows.
"You got some nerve coming all the way to see us." "The dark portal has been restored,"
Gorfing began, but Ren waved that away with a snort.
"I saw it in my dreams," the orc leader replied. "I knew it had been one of you warlocks causing it."
A frown creased his broad face.
"What about it?"
Gorfing frowned. This conversation was not going as he hoped.
"Ner'zhul leads the Horde now," he said. "I have been sent to bring you back into the fold. You and your Black Rock clan. We need the Dragon Maw clan as well, and the Red Dragons they command.
Ren glanced over at Mame, and the two brothers laughed together. After 2 years where nothing happens, you come marching back up here into my keep, a handful of fresh warriors trotting behind you, and you expect me to get all excited about kneeling before a withered old shaman. And by the way, I should also hand over not only my own warriors, but my dragons as well. He laughed again, though his eyes blazed with fury. Not damn likely.
You must,
Gorfin insisted.
We need your strength and your dragons to carry out our plan.
I don't care what you need, Ren replied coldly. He rose, and Gorfin realized that despite his childish attitude, Ren Blackhand was very dangerous. That's your problem, not mine. I don't give a damn about whatever old Ner'zhul might be planning. Where was he when we fought the Alliance? Was he here? Where was he when Doomhammer fell? I was here! Me too! Echoed Mame. Where was he when the portal was destroyed and we got stuck here? Ren continued. Where was he when we were hunted for 2 long years and slowly rebuilt our fortress with whatever orcs had survived and could make their way to us? I'll tell you where. He was safe and snug on Draenor and not lifting a finger to help. Ren snatched up his sword and slammed it down on the throne's arm, so hard the stone splintered. Mame jumped, then laughed with an echo of Maya in his voice. But I was here. I pulled these orcs back together. I rebuilt the Horde, not over on Draenor, but here on Azeroth. Right beneath the Alliance's nose. I am War Chief now, and no used-up old shaman is going to take that away from me. Gorfin longed to smear the boy into paste, but refrained.
Please,
he said through clenched teeth.
Please, I ask you to reconsider. Without your aid, Ner'zhul will
fail. Ren finished bluntly. Mame looked gleeful. He's got no experience with real war. He's got no head for tactics, no understanding for combat, and no real leadership skills. The Alliance will crush his little pretend horde, and then, he grinned, I will pick up the pieces. We will gather all the survivors to us, Mame and I, just as we have been doing all along since the last war ended. Mame crept closer, and Ren let his hand fall on his brother's head, as he might a pet dog's. And with the Horde, the real Horde even larger, and with the dragons at our side, and me in command, we're going to sweep across the face of Azeroth. Ren grinned directly at Gorfin. And then, dead man, you will serve me. Behind Gorfin, Tagar stiffened.
You coward!
He howled at Ren.
Traitorous dog! I'll cut you down like the cur you are and take your throne for myself! Then your people will follow my orders and take their place in the Horde once more!
Oh, yeah? Ren replied lazily. You want to attack me now? His grin widened, and Gorfin turned to rest a hand on Tagar's shoulder.
He has guards nearby. Many of them,
he warned the Bone Chewer chieftain quietly.
If you attack him, he'll kill you, and then we're short one chieftain.
He shook his head.
Now is not the time.
Tagar grumbled, but stepped back a pace. Ren looked disappointed.
One final time. Will you join us?
Gorfin asked Ren softly. Oh, wait. Let me think. No. Ren retorted, smirking. Mame chuckled.
Very well, Gorfin bowed. Then there is nothing more to say.
Ren laughed.
Go on, he instructed. I can't wait to get news of your glorious destruction.
He and his brother laughed again, and the sound echoed through the chamber and into the halls and corridors beyond as Gorfin led his disappointed group out of the keep and back down from the spire itself. The sun had already set, and the sky was fading from dusk to true dark. Gorfin glared at the dancing orange and yellow campfire. Things had not gone according to plan, and he was deep in thought, pondering his next move. The others were wisely silent, and the only sound was the crackle of flames and the occasional soft grunt of quiet conversation. A sudden noise in the darkness made them all leap to their feet. The tension stung taut as a blow. "Human! Kill him!" came the cry from the orcs set to keep watch. The Death Knights stayed silent, but the orcs roared, happy to have a target for the frustration. Gorfin could see the human now, wandering boldly up to their very encampment. Tagar charged him, bringing down his club in a blow that would crush the human's fragile skull. What happened next stunned them all. Gorfin watched as the human reached upward, almost languidly, caught the club, and twisted it from the orc's grasp. Tagar gasped at him, and then he and the others prepared to lunge again. "Hold!" the human cried. Even Gorfin doubted he could move against the human. Such was the power in that single word. Who was this man? Gorfin watched, curious and not a little concerned as the human entered the ring of firelight. He would be handsome among his people, Gorfin thought, tall and well-built for a human, with lustrous black hair, strong yet elegant features. Fine cloth draped his frame, and an untouched jewel sword hung at his side. He grimaced slightly and brushed something from his sleeve. "I know you would like nothing better than to attack me again, but you've sullied my clothes enough for one night. I don't fancy getting your blood on it." He smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that revealed perfect teeth. "I am not quite what I seem, you see." His shadow flickered behind him, then suddenly seemed to rise up, growing monstrous in size and shape, great shadow wings spreading all around them.
Who are you?
Gorfin demanded.
I have been known by many names. The grin widened. One of them is Deathwing.
Deathwing? Gorfin's mind reeled. He didn't question the statement. Bizarre as it sounded, he already felt the faintest hint of Deathwing's power. Gorfin had heard of the mighty Black Dragon, perhaps the single most powerful creature in Azeroth. They had seen black dragons a few times during the war, and Gorfin had always wondered why the Dragonmaw clan hadn't captured them instead of the reluctant red dragons. He had suspected they were either too difficult a target, or that doing so would awaken Deathwing's wrath. Gorfin tried to speak, but could not. So stunned and horrified he was. He tried again.
What do you want with us?
Deathwing waved a beringed hand abruptly.
Calm yourself, he replied, slightly contemptuous. I have not come to slay you, else you would be mere ash already.
His eyes glowed from within for an instant, hinting at the vast fires that lurked beneath that human facade.
Quite the contrary. I have been watching you, and I like what I see.
He spread a kerchief on the nearby rock, then settled himself beside the fire and motioned for them all to do the same. They obeyed, slowly.
You have great strength and impressive focus.
He grinned at them. And I would very much like to behold the world that gave rise to such fierce and determined people. Gorfin studied their uninvited guest. Was Deathwing asking to visit Draenor? Why? As if reading his mind, Deathwing turned to meet Gorfin's gaze and nodded. His dark eyes were hooded, the power within banked, and for the moment he seemed merely a self-assured human. I know of your meeting with the one called Ren Blackhand, Deathwing said softly. Idiots. He and his brother both. But not without their own power. And I know you desire the red dragons the Dragonmaw clan has. Enslaved. The corners of his mouth turned up at that last word, as if the very idea delighted him. Substandard beasts, in my opinion. I don't know why you're bothering with them. Gorfine wasn't sure how to respond.
Dragons are powerful beings,
He began cautiously. Indeed we are. You wish for allies. Then I have an offer for you. My mighty children shall lend you their aid, and willingly rather than under duress. One of the orcs, obviously anxious to please the unexpected guest, hesitantly offered Deathwing a mug of ale. The great creature frowned terribly, glaring at the orc. Take that putrid stuff away. Cowed, the orc retreated. Deathwing composed himself, turning his banked fire eyes to Gorfind. Where was I? Oh, yes. I will lend you the aid of my children. In return, I demand safe passage through the dark portal, and aid in transporting some cargo through there as well. You want to go to Draenor? Hagar burst out. Why? The smile Deathwing turned upon the bone chewer chieftain froze any further interruption. The orc's throat. My plans are my own, orc, the dragon man said quietly, his voice almost a hiss. But don't worry, it will not hinder your own plotting. Gorfin considered the offer. He needed dragons, whatever their color, for their plan to work. If he accepted the bargain, he would not need to deal with Ren again after all, though he might pound some humility into the self-styled war chief later if he had the chance. He didn't know what Deathwing was up to, but as long as he didn't interrupt their own plans, he didn't see a problem with granting the dragon's request.
Very well,
He said finally, Lord Deathwing. He smiled without humor, and there was an edge to his voice. Let's observe the properties, shall we? Gorfin inclined his head.
Of course, Lord Deathwing. I agree. We give your people and cargo safe passage. But first, I have a mission to accomplish in the north. We need to retrieve some cargo of my own.
Very well, Deathwing agreed. He rose gracefully to his feet. I will speak to my children and inform them of this bargain. When I return, I shall help expedite this task of yours. He dusted his hands off, although he had touched nothing, and without another word, he strode off into the shadows.
Right,
Gorfin said after a moment, when he was sure the dragon was gone and not about to leap out from the darkness.
Let's pack up. We need to get moving, and we don't have much time.
The others hastened to obey, all of them clearly happy to focus their attention on breaking camp rather than on the strange figure who had just allied himself with them. Gorfin just hoped Deathwing was really an ally. If he proved otherwise, there was nothing they could do to stop him. Two figures, male and female, turned at Deathwing's approach as they waited, not far from the orc's encampment. The man was powerfully made and wore a short dark beard and neat mustache, while the woman was petite and had a pale skin and long flowing straight hair. Both had glossy black hair and features similar to those of Deathwing, sported in his human guise. What news, father? The woman asked, her voice like silk over iron. They have agreed, as I knew they would, Onyxia, Deathwing replied. He stroked his daughter's cheek, and she leaned her face into his hands, smiling up at him. Soon we shall have 2 worlds at our disposal instead of 1. He kissed her pale brow and turned to her brother. But I have another task for you while I am gone. Name it, father, the man replied, and it shall be done. Deathwing smiled. There are still orcs within Blackrock Spire. They have severed ties with their kin and refuse to rejoin the Horde. That leaves them ripe for the plucking. His smile widened as they reached out to clasp his son by the shoulder. When I return, Nefarian, I want this Ren Blackhand. You too will take control of the mountain and the orcs living in it. They will become our servants. Nefarian grinned, his expression a mirror of his father's. Little could be easier. We'll have the orcs and the mountain fortress waiting for you, he promised. Excellent. Deathwing regarded his children for a moment, then nodded. Now I must return to our new allies and aid them in their little tasks, that they may the more quickly turn to mine. As their father returned the way he had come, Onyxia bared her teeth in a feral smile. Well, brother, we shall go see our new home and our new subjects. Indeed, we shall, sister, Nefarian replied with a laugh. Good sport ahead, I think. He offered his arm, which she accepted, curling daintily pale fingers around his powerful bicep, and together they vanished into the shadow. A heartbeat later, the sound of great wings flapping over her head blended into the evening breeze.